Oh, I see Susanna's back. I thought you're. So let's see. So one question was, after these annotations are being created by the community, does someone revise them to include them in the official gene models?
Yeah, so Dave and so the community, curation and annotation team, we are revising. We are looking at gene models before we integrate that. So we've, yeah.
So there's a mechanism basically. It's but it's not done on a, we don't do one gene and then update because to update the whole genome is actually a big task for a single gene. So we wait until there's a threshold of gene models that can be elevated to the official annotation.
Yes.
And then then at some point we can update the whole thing. But one thing I just want to point out. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Omar.
I was just going to say the fact that when you make the change and that appears the next day for everyone to see, I think that's really cool, right? Because you're basically contributing your annotation. So even if the annotation never gets updated, people will always be able to see that community provided annotation, which makes it which makes it really nice and useful for everybody. Sorry, Uli, what are you going to say?
Yeah, just want to say you might get an email because we also have automated checks. So they check if your gene model has a start and a stop, which all gene models they need, a start and a stop. So you might get an email if that's missing. So you also get emails, once a month, I think, if a gene model is unfinished. So you get also automated checks. But before we integrate it completely into the official annotation, we do manual checks as well. So, and
yeah, the other question was, I think it was answered by Dave, but
okay, great. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think we can just continue this discussion. It's it's 1 o'clock, but we have an open discussion from 1 to 1:30 if people want to still talk about. If they want to drop off, feel free to drop off. If you want to just continue discussing gene annotation, we can, or we're open for any questions.
So Alessandro has a good question. How does the threshold work for understudied organisms? I mean, that's a really good question, right? So if there are only 5 labs in the world working on that particular organism, and the question is how many genes are going to be annotated. I think that's the spirit of your question. I think at least.
Well, I think Alessandro does 50 changes, then we'll definitely integrate them. Usually it's about 100, isn't it? Really.
It's usually about 100, but I think we do consider. I know we've done that in the past where we apply our own sort of weighting weighting algorithm to annotation. So if it's clear that that's something that we can obviously do for specific genomes. It doesn't come for free, right? There is effort that needs to be put into these, and so we have to always consider that as well in the context of everything else we're doing. But yeah, it's a good question.
Function annotation, which you also can do in Apollo, then this gets integrated much faster because we have a different mechanism for this. But for structure annotation, this needs to go first through the EBI. And so it's a long process until it really gets onto the gene record page. Like we've just done it for a very good point. Toxoplasma, and that we've started, I think, in June, passing it on to the EBI, and then now in November, it appears now on the gene record page. So yeah,
But it's a good point about the functional annotation of, if somebody knows that a gene, has either a specific name that is known in the community or a gene that's hypothetical, but you've done the experiments and you know that this gene is a phosphofructokinase, you can actually provide that functional annotation through Apollo, and then that gets elevated much more quickly. So.
Or you can add a user comment, and then someone also might look at it and change it.
Yeah. Monica's pointing out that AmoebaDB has fewer annotations compared to the other organisms, and that is really something to consider. And that some genomes some organisms are just more mature. They've been studied longer. They're easier to study, so there's more data associated with them. And that's partly why, you know, you can really take advantage of our orthology profiles that we have. And if you are looking at a very understudied organism, you can look at the data in other organisms and then transform bioorthology into the your genome of interest. But then you also have to take that with a, you know, grain of salt and really check on those things.
There is a track that we didn't actually mention, which is the NRDB, so the non-redundant database track, and that actually has quite a few alignments that you can use, like orthology, but it has more scope.
Good point. Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah. Also, any question about the day as well? So it doesn't have to be specifically about Apollo. So if you had a question about the looking at gene models or genome browser in general, now's a good time to ask those questions as well.
I have a question regarding organisms that are not included in PUPatDB. Would it be possible to upload information and then analyze it, for example, in Apollo Sandbox or something like that?
The short answer is no. It has to be loaded as part of the unfortunately, it has to be loaded as part of the PUPatDB pipeline. We have not, I mean, it would be great if you can upload your own genome and do that. And Uli or Dave or others may have some ideas about other annotation platforms that you could potentially use, but those probably won't be platforms that are online or public. There'll be something you'd have to probably download or install locally, but I don't know. If it's a genome that is that should be in PUPatDB and you're, you know, it's ready to go public or whatever, then of course we can load it and then it can be potentially made available in Apollo depending on the needs of the community. So Uli or Dave, I don't know if you have anything else to add about you know, what they could use for annotation. Oh, I see you put perfect. Okay, there you go. Dave gave you the answer in the chat. So
okay, thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to note, there will be another version of Apollo coming out probably next year sometime, which will allow greater functionality. It will be based in JBrowse 2 and it integrates a lot of functional annotation as well as structural, and has the ability with like the Synteny tracks, but a lot more dynamic. I think that's the word for it. So Apollo 3 coming soon.
And you can use it on your desktop. So if you have your own annotation and sequence, you can just use it yourself. It doesn't have to be online somewhere like the current Apollo.
cool. Any other questions? People all tired?
I think we may have used up all the bandwidth at the
Good. Well, I mean, if there aren't any other questions, right? I think it's probably totally fine to
drop off. Yeah.
To sign off. Yeah. So
sorry, please, before you go, Omar, can I just make a request?
Yes.
Well, presently, I'm the head of the department of my own department.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in Nigeria.
Yes.
But there is a challenge. We see a wide gap between research in the Western world and here in Nigeria. And we see bioinformatics as a means of bridging the gap. The sophisticated equipments over there are not available here. But making use of the data available there online through bioinformatics may really help us bridge the gap. Like my own department, we had a professor who was involved in bioinformatics, but he retired about 3 years ago. And getting somebody else to fill in the gap has been a challenge. Now, I just want to make a request if University of Georgia can really be of help in seeing my department as a department that has to be brought up in bioinformatics, or your team rather, as a department that has to be brought up in bioinformatics, especially our postgraduate students and even the staff, members of staff. So we have that huge, should I call it gap, information gap, which will, I believe, you may be of help to assist us in filling. Especially when it comes to bioinformatics. So
right. So no, I mean, I appreciate that problem. That's obviously a very clear problem and need to and clearly in areas of the world where it's expensive to run certain experiments in the lab. But bioinformatics is obviously an attractive alternative to doing research that doesn't require a huge amount of at least laboratory equipment and reagents and so forth. Of course, the biggest reagent here is the person, right? Who you need the expertise. I mean, from our end, what we do offer is we offer these types of workshops, but I suspect that in addition to learning about how to use these online resources, the bioinformatician in your department, you would want somebody who actually has the expertise to sort of develop and run bioinformatics tools and analyses locally at your institution, and not rely on analyzed data in resources. While there could be a great supplement, but in a department perspective, you would want somebody who comes in with those bioinformatics skills, which I think is where you would, my biggest recommendation would be to make sure you send, students to do postdocs or get expertise in bioinformatics in other labs, and then hopefully they would come back. I mean, obviously that's the biggest trick. Or obviously, young faculty members who then are given the opportunity to go somewhere and spend a few months and work in somebody's lab on a bioinformatics project, right? And then learn those tricks. In which case, then I would highly recommend that the interaction should be with specific labs. I think an organization like ViewPathGB, because we are sort of funded by a contract and our goal is a service-oriented goal, we don't have I guess official sort of process where we can integrate people into the project where they come in and learn for 3 months and then leave, or a few months and leave. That becomes much more difficult for us to rationalize to our funders. Like, they just won't allow us to do it, unfortunately. But there are many members of the group who are bioinformaticians and have their own labs, and it's possible that some of them may be interested in some collaborative projects. And that would be the approach that I would take if I were you. I know it's not a great answer, but it's I think that's where you would potentially get the biggest bang for your buck, and is that getting somebody from your institution to be able to go and work with other groups. They may not necessarily have to travel, right? If they have the basic informatics skills, they may be able to work on some projects remotely, from Nigeria with a group in Glasgow or Liverpool or Georgia or UPenn or wherever. And then just have a mentor basically somewhere else who then can guide them, but then they would have to have some basic skills as well.
Please recommend such labs, please.
Yes, so we can maybe we can talk about that offline, and we can come up with a list. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of like the people who are the PIs on the project, you know, but of course, you know, you'd have to email them directly and talk to them. But then there are many other such labs in the world that work on, you know, of course, you'd want to think about a project that is meaningful for, you know, your region in Nigeria, and what diseases or what aspect of biology you're interested in pursuing in your institute, right? And so you'd want to then tailor that to those particular bioinformatics groups as well.
Okay.
So
and then
yeah,
I would like to have your email then, so we can chat offline.
sure. I will chat you my email. So
Okay. Thank you very much.
no problem. Let's see. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yep.
Looks like we might be done for today. There's no other questions.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody.